Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Experts About Nothing.
Yeah.
Priya's just doing a dance.
Yeah, welcome back.
Today we have another fabulous guest. But before we tell you who it is, please follow us on Instagram at Experts About Nothing, TikTok at Experts About Nothing. We have a couple winners on there.
Listen, if you want to see Diksha's claim to fame right now, I suggest you check out our TikTok. And that's all I'll say about that.
Not the extra hype for not even 1,000 likes yet.
No, listen.
But this is a win for me.
I don't even know 1,000 people.
It's a win for us.
Yeah, like I'm like, whoa. No, this is a massive win. So check out our TikTok.
And if you're loving the show, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider leaving us a review.
All right, so now on to our special guest of the day. We have Adya Roy on the pod today, also known as the Desicareerwoman on Instagram. This was such an amazing conversation. Adya is an industrial engineer and a content creator with a focus around female empowerment, career development, and Indian culture. And our conversation really spanned all of those things. We talked about, building up your career, speaking up in the workplace, her pretty unique global upbringing and all the different places that she went to school and lived when she was growing up, and a lot about like body positivity and just being an Indian female in this day and age. So without further ado,
let's welcome Adya. Roll the tape.
Roll it.
Audio Jungle. Welcome, Adya. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you on the pod.
Yes.
You're a pod veteran, which we learned. So you're probably gonna school us in this episode.
Absolutely not.
But yeah, we're so excited to have this conversation with you. I think both of us really enjoyed getting to know you ahead of this interview and learning about your journey and your presence on social media. And just to start off, we wanted to understand what was your upbringing like and your community like when you were younger, just to paint the picture of who you are today and how you got there.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Adya. I am also known as the Desicareerwoman on Instagram, which is where we met. So I am the daughter of two engineers. So for me to want to be highly educated wasn't a surprise. My mom is, I think, a third generation engineer. She is the first female in her family to become an engineer, though. So she kind of broke that barrier for me. I think I had things pretty easy compared to her. And then my dad comes from a family of all doctors, and like the rebellion was to become an engineer, which I find really funny. And then my mom is very hardworking and diligent, works for everything that she does. And I've kind of gotten a combination of both, where I work hard for the things that I like, not for everything. I will work really hard for my Instagram, but like if it's a job that I don't like or a boss that I don't like, I definitely take a step back. Growing up, I actually grew up around the world. So my dad was in an expat position. And so we grew up in Singapore, where I was born and lived for 12 years, which is the maximum I've lived. And then came to the US for about 5 years, went to Australia for a year and a half, the UK for a year. And then I came back to the US in 2015. So it's been almost 8 years since. So I think it's about 50-50 between Singapore and US right now, which is actually quite accurate about how I feel. It's definitely like pulled me in two directions. It's really funny. People always ask me why I don't identify as like the global career woman or like the expat career woman or something like that. Why Desi? And it's really funny, but Desi was the one thing that kind of kept me grounded through all of the moving. Like when I lived in Singapore, I still wasn't like a local Singaporean because my parents were immigrants. I was a first generation Singaporean. So I still felt like an outsider there a little bit. Coming to the US, I was definitely a foreigner. Everything just kept pointing to me as an outsider. And the one thing I could always call mine was like my Desi culture. The one community that I always found whenever I moved was Desi kids and Desi community and like my parents' family friends. And it was really easy to always have both language and culture to fall back on as the common ground, no matter what, wherever we were in the world.
I love that. And then I also had a kind of a branching question from that.
Yeah.
So, do you find that as you grew up, you kind of gravitated towards people similar to you, like in the Desi community wherever you went, or were you branching out and also integrating with people that maybe are not Desi?
I would say like most of my inner circle has always been desi. For example, like when I went to school in Australia, I went to a private school and it was pretty much all oil and gas kids that were all American that were based in Australia. We actually had no Asians. And so it was really weird for me because that was my first time experiencing a school with no Asians. And I definitely gravitated towards Asians for quite a while. Like in Singapore, obviously, it was definitely very Asian. Coming to the US, I had a mix of East Asian American and South Asian American friends. And then going to Australia was brand new to me because I didn't find anybody that looked like me. And so it was very natural that I found the next closest thing and I actually made Latina American friends. Their families are very similar to ours. Their values are very similar to ours. And like those were my two best friends in high school. Having been through the immigrant experience in some way or the other is definitely something that I think has been in common with all of my friends. It's like a very shared experience.
Wow. No, that makes so much sense. And it's crazy how like a shared experience makes you gravitate towards people without you even planning it, because you guys have that inbuilt empathy almost for one another and what you guys have been through. That makes a lot of sense. We talk about it all the time with like the Indian American experience. I mean, both of us were like raised primarily in America, but even without planning it, you look around and you're like, oh, all my best friends are like Indian or like, you know, people of color or like have immigrant parents. How did that work out? And it is that shared experience that I think brings people together and helps you form stronger bonds more easily. One thing that stood out to me when you were talking about how you lived in a lot of different places and you found a lot of community and identity within your like Desi roots, was that something that you gradually had to get to over time? Did you have a period of time where you did struggle with your identity because of all of the movement that was happening in your life? Or was that kind of apparent to you from the onset?
I definitely think I was always very desi. So I was in sixth grade when I left Singapore. And I think I was already past that teenage crisis thing. Like, I think I was just a little bit more mature. I guess like being proud of your culture is something maybe I think parents could have been maybe more verbal about, that there's nothing to be ashamed of. But yeah, I never had the identity crisis, but I had the crisis that I felt really lonely because everybody else was going through the crisis at that time. But it's funny that like you have strength in numbers. The first middle school I came to here, it was predominantly East Asian amongst the Asian community and select few South Asian people. And then my parents moved me to a different high school. And there we actually had like a 35% South Asian majority. Oh, wow. And that was like one of the bigger chunks of the school. And there people were completely unabashed about their Indian culture. Like I remember this is like one of my like prime experiences growing up outside India. There was like an India-Pakistan cricket match in 2010. And it was like a World Cup final or semi-final. Yeah. And like there were aunties that showed up to our school with laddus.
Mm-hmm.
Aunties were literally sitting at home waiting for India to win. Once India won, they literally just like stormed our school. They didn't even sign in through the office or anything. They just like happened through the gates and were just giving us laddus. And I was like, this is a prime Indian American experience. And I remember thinking that this would have never happened in my other school. Mm-hmm. Like at my other school, people wouldn't even have admitted that they watched cricket. It's such a unique experience. I've told my friends this and they're like, no, that's just your school. Like that did not happen to us. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, it really is indicative about what you see people embracing their culture more, you'll feel more comfortable. But if you feel like you have to like code switch and cosplay into the environment that you're in,
into the majority, yeah,
that's what you do. I think now we can kind of switch gears a little bit. And on the topic of school, growing up, what did you want to be when you were an adult?
This is hilarious. I actually always wanted to be an influencer.
Oh,
yeah. That was something that was always on my to-do. At that point, it was YouTube. That was the only thing that was around at that time. And I used to like sit and watch Lily sing all the time, especially like her lifestyle vlogs was something that I was such a sucker for. And I was like, I have to become a YouTuber. By the time I hit high school, I have to learn iMovie. I need to know video editing. I went and took photography courses. I always had that in my mind that I really wanted to become an influencer. So that's something that I stuck with. However, 9 to 5 wise, engineering wasn't on my radar for a very long time. I actually always gravitated towards bio and like genetics. If you look at my high school transcript, it's filled with like what I would consider like a very pre-med mindset. And then in my senior year in Australia, I actually ran out of classes to take. It was a small private school. They didn't have that many classes offered. A lot of these electives were actually offered online by US schools. And I was like, I'm tired of learning online. I would rather take a physical class. And the only physical class that I hadn't taken at the school yet was AP Physics. And I bombed my first test. And physics took like a second to click for me. And my physics teacher was extremely patient.
Aww.
And he saw this girl that had started to make sense of it. Everybody else in my class was doing it as a graduation requirement. Nobody else had any interest in it. So he started to take a lot of time and effort. And he was like, I can give you extra projects so that I want to see where I can like gauge your physics levels at. That was my first touch into the engineering world. But it was really strange because it happened senior year. I'd already started sending applications out, all my pre-med applications. And it somehow happened that I had heard about programs in Europe that directly give you admission into med school as an undergrad. And so I applied to a couple of those programs and I got into one. So I decided to go to Europe. I went to Scotland and I did med school for a year. And this is not something I've ever talked about on a podcast, I think, but I struggled. I really struggled. And like, there are people who have been dreaming about being a doctor since they were 5. And my drive wasn't the same. And I realized that pretty soon. And I was like, these kids are insanely dedicated. And so I kind of like took a step back. I also didn't particularly like the environment in Scotland. Within the institution, I have felt like a weird amount of racism towards the fact that I sounded American. And so like, people used to refer to me as the American girl, but not in a positive way. I didn't feel like super welcome there either. So it was a combination of a lot of things. And I came back after 1 year here to Houston, where my parents were living at the time. And I told them, I'm like, I'm really miserable. If you give me an out, I will take the out. I don't know that I want to spend 5 whole years to become a very mediocre doctor in a country where I don't feel welcome. All of it is just not sounding appealing to me. And like, my parents were fully supportive in the sense that, again, like my dad kind of had that thing too. He was like, oh, you don't want to become a doctor, become an engineer. You don't want to become a doctor? Sure, you can stay in the US and become an engineer. So I ended up going to community college here for 2 semesters. And then I transferred to Purdue to do engineering. And it was one of the best choices I ever made, actually. Like, honestly, I really loved my time at Purdue. I started off as a chemical engineer, didn't fully vibe with chemi, and then I switched to industrial engineering. And that's kind of where I found a very, very perfect niche for myself. 3 years out of college, my job is still related to concepts I learned as an IE in school.
That's awesome.
Like, it's like the best thing I ever did for myself.
Aww.
It was a long journey though, like end to end. It took me 6 years to finish 1 undergrad degree because it was over 3 schools and 3 majors.
Yeah.
And that's honestly so refreshing to hear because I feel like a lot of people, myself included, start undergrad with this vision of what they're going to do and this whole plan, and they're too scared to stray away from the path that they, sought out for themselves at one point. It's definitely important to encourage those that are younger than us to also go down that path, even if it's a little bit harder, it takes a little bit longer, it's okay because they'll come out on top.
Yeah. I think we think of this ideal perfect journey of I know exactly what I'm going to do when I'm 17, 18 years old. Like, who knows that? Why are we making that decision at that age? And then
also they've taken 0 courses.
Yeah, like you don't know, taking some like random generic curriculum, and then you're like, oh, okay, now I have the knowledge to choose my profession of life. And you're like, actually, it might take a few tries for you to actually know what you want to do. Like, that makes such logical sense. I think the society in the world makes you feel some weird sort of shame around it if you don't hit the jackpot on your first try. But like, it's so well worth it to have that self-awareness and go through the struggle of the journey to get to where you're supposed to be versus trying to like force yourself in a box that you're not meant to be in. I know I had a similar experience to you where I was like in the engineering school in my school and I was like, this is just not what I think I should be doing. And you know that deep down, once you make that call, the world opens up to you, even though it's scary.
Yeah. And also like judgment, like you said, like we have this innate shame. I grew up being top of my class. I graduated as the valedictorian. I don't think anybody would have imagined that I dropped out a year later or that I would go to community college. But I also used to judge people. And then I was sitting in community college, starting from 0. Nobody cared that I was valedictorian or what my SAT score was. All they cared about was that I needed to go to school and I needed to finish credits. And like, sometimes that makes you think about it. You're just like, all of this effort that we put so much pressure on ourselves, we don't know what that's going to be in the long term. Maybe you should sometimes just take a step back and like chill, like enjoy your life a little, because you never know if it's worth it. Like,
I know.
There's
Yeah.
nothing I relate more to than that statement.
yeah.
No, that's so true. Honestly, those types of lessons in life are so key because you need to have a reality check. And it's so natural when you're a kid and you're like in your bubble to be like judging people. What you pride yourself on is like what you pass judgment on for other people. But like whatever you have those grounding experiences where you're like, not everyone has the same life story as me. I think it really shapes you. And I feel like that leads us to our next question of your social media presence and your like impact. I think that helps people connect with you because you have developed that empathy in it. Now you have like a wider reach and a wider audience due to the diversity of your experiences. It's the cracks in our story that makes us more interesting.
Absolutely.
You know?
I love that. I love that. That's so true. Like, I think the thing that people message me most about is actually something that I haven't even talked about in years, but is toxic workplaces. And my first two positions were kind of super toxic. One was more than the other. One I left within 6 months. The other I could bear for a year. But people message me all the time about toxic workplaces. How do I handle a horrible manager? These kind of things. And I was like, I haven't touched that since 2021. When I left the toxic company, that was it. I stopped talking about it. But people still remember that. And that toxic workplaces thing is something that I definitely put on my list to bring back as a topic and be like, these are the red flags you should look for before you sign the offer. This is not normal. You deserve better than these experiences, right? That's the thing that resonates the most with people. And then the second thing that resonates with people is people talking about their 9 to 5s. And I think that's something that's so recent because I remember back even in the YouTube days, I followed makeup tutorials. Like it was all very 5 to 9. And so it's one of those things where I think people don't talk about their 9 to 5s enough, but like the fact that somebody does, people are very willing to share even sometimes. Like I have heard some crazy stories come in my DMs, the amount of things that we experience in our 9 to 5, but it's one of those things where like we have that mentality that this is just something we have to stick through. This is the path I've chosen for myself. And no matter what torture happens, I got to do it. And that's something that's so changing with our generation. Like people are not staying with one company for 30 years anymore. And people are not going to HR. I think that's something that I've like told like 50 people. I'm like, go to HR. That's literally what they're there for. Because people always fear that lashback. They're like, if I go to HR will have this on file and I'll be seen as a problematic employee. I'm like, be problematic. You deserve a bare minimum. Be problematic. Don't stay quiet about it. Otherwise, the problem's never going to be solved. Your experience is going to be shared amongst people to come.
That's a really important thing that I think a lot of people, especially first generation immigrants, like they go into work and then they're like, okay, I'm just going to do what I'm told because our whole life has kind of been about doing what we're told, whether that's like from our family or from society or just being aware that like anything you tolerate that's not right is just going to be thrown back at someone else, literally you 5 years ago. Now, more of the onus is on us to being the change. At least I want to believe that. So
and I think sometimes like not everybody is in the perfect position to speak up. Like for example, you mentioned first generation immigrants, like a lot of them, especially when they have that my company controls my visa dangling over their head, it's not as easy to speak up. So there are lots of times where I will personally use my stability and I'm like, you know what? I'll create the problem for you. I will go speak up for you. I will do that because I hope that trickle effect just trickles somewhere. And that's something that I think as allies is really important. If we are in a better position to speak up about something, that I think that onus also falls on people who have that privilege.
No, that makes so much sense. I think that's something that people have to learn over time. And from my experience, the crux of that is making sure that you yourself are secure. So much comes down to like your own self-worth. You clearly have a ton of self-confidence and like a really great sense of self to be like, yeah, I'm not afraid to speak up for not only myself, but the people around me, because I know my worth. And I know that like, if someone lashed back at me for doing the right thing, then I can walk and be worthy somewhere else. So much of that is just building up that rapport with yourself, which takes time. And our hope, and even just like having this podcast and like hearing conversations like this, highlighting people like yourself who do have that, is people learn that earlier and earlier on in their lives.
Absolutely. When were you first inspired to like start your page? What did it first start out as? And like, how has it evolved since you started?
Yeah, good question. So like I said, I wanted to become a YouTuber since I was 13. That's where it all started. My parents were actually really against social media. And I think there was a lot of talk back then that like college admissions, they would go do like a deep dive on your social media and like see what you're posting, stuff like that. So my parents were really against like Facebook even. So as I came into college, actually, when I was in Scotland, I created my first Instagram page and it was actually fashion. It was very interesting. I never thought of myself as a fashionable person, but because we were in med school, we actually had to wear formals every day.
Oh.
And one of the things that I had noticed was I had back then, I think my body type has changed over time, but I used to have a pear-shaped body. And that's something that I didn't see represented in social media very much, or like media in general. So finding formal pants and like those kind of things were stuff that I wanted to talk about. And so I started this page where I would kind of like go through both like 9 to 5 outfits and again, any standard undergrad life, nightlife outfits. It was a really good Instagram page. And because this was back in 2014, social media wasn't as saturated back then. So my Instagram grew to about 33,000 followers within 6 months without reels. This is before reels. These are just static photos. And I was like, wow, this is really something. And needless to say, like you said, that self-confidence that takes time, I let the haters get to me. It was my own friends. People were like, oh, you know, Adya, she posts on social media because she loves attention. She doesn't get enough attention from the people in her real life. Nobody compliments her outfits in real, so she goes online looking for outfit compliments. And I'm like, that's not it at all. If that's what people are seeing out of my effort, I don't want it. And so I closed the account, like I deleted the account. And I had no social media for another year. And I was wondering, I was like, I wonder if I could reach out to these YouTubers and see if their friends had said similar things and stuff like that. And then I came back to Purdue. At Purdue, I started a private Instagram just for friends. By my second year at Purdue, I actually started dating somebody who was a photographer. And I was a photographer too, but it's really hard to be in front and behind the camera at the same time. He was now behind the camera. I had some great content coming on my Instagram, and people were like, this is really high quality content. You should consider making it a public account. And I was like, I'll think about it. And I kind of like continued on that. And again, I wouldn't have been able to do this without my ex. I still give him a lot of credit for that. He really did motivate me to make it a public account. And he was just like, don't change anything. You don't even have to decide what you want to post right now. Just change that button and see what happens. That's exactly what I did. I didn't even change my handle, didn't change my bio. I just made it a public account. And he was like, okay, now think about it. What do you enjoy filming? Don't think as much about what the audience wants to see yet, because you got to polish up your creation skills. So my first version of my Instagram was about self-care and self-love. And I wouldn't say that it's not true today, but it was a lot of like skincare routines and taking care of yourself, or like what to do on a Friday night. How do you relax after school? And I was still a senior. So it was still like from a college point of view. As I went through senior year, a lot of life experiences changed me. The first life experience that changed me was that I was a COVID graduate. So a lot of my offers got rescinded. If I don't have a full-time job at the end of this, I'm literally going to have to go back to Singapore because I was on a visa at that point. And I was like, okay, I can't post right now because life is too crazy. I was like, okay, I need to get my offers back on the table. Let's focus on offers right now. So while focusing on offers, that ex who motivated me to create the account, and I broke up as well with the impending graduation and all these like adulting things that were happening, we also decided to take a step back from our relationship and ended it completely. And I was like, okay, well, the person who was helping me create the content is gone. I don't even have a job offer. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to create content at all. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to be in this country. And so I handle stress very weirdly. And I deleted Instagram for like 3 months. This time I was like, I'm not going to make the mistake. I'm not going to delete the account. I'm just going to delete the app off of my phone. And I went MIA, completely MIA on my audience of about 5,000 at this time. And then I came back to it, obviously, at some point. And I was like, you know what? I'll start creating content again. The thing that motivated me to start creating content again was I started working with Avrani. And Avrani was just starting up at that time, and they were looking for content creators. I loved doing skincare videos. And that's the first time I started my transition videos was with Avrani. I don't remember. It was like one of those challenge where you just like pass things to the next screen.
Oh, yeah.
You remember the makeup brush thing?
Yes.
That was the challenge that we did, except we did it with the Avrani face mask. And that video like really got me back in my juices again. This was April of COVID. And I was like, okay, you know what? I think I can start creating again. I started creating again and talking about work-life balance and being excited about my upcoming full-time full-time, which I'd by then gotten an offer. And about 1 month into work starting, I was like, I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm pretty good at creating content now. I'd learned how to use a tripod. I had started creating content myself, not relying on anybody else. I was really proud of all of these things, but I still had no idea what I was doing. So that's kind of when two very quick pivots happened. The first pivot that happened was my friends were like, you love podcasts and you love talking. So why don't you start a podcast? And I was like, I could do that. And they were like, but make it like a video podcast. Don't do like the whole like audio podcast. Cause I think part of what I liked was like video editing too. So they were like, stick to the video stuff. And I was like, oh, what, like coffee with Karan kind of thing? And they're just like, yeah, but like make it your name, make it Absinthe with Adya. And I was like, that's brilliant. And that's exactly what the first pivot was. My Instagram handle changed to Absinthe with Adya. And with every intention of it being like a talk show that I wanted to have different people on IG Live and then save it on my feed. And the funny thing about it is I never got around to having a single guest on Absinthe with Adya. And I was like, you know what? No, I want content. And I'm sure you guys face this all the time with scheduling. I was like, I want content that I can do myself. Like, I don't want to have to rely on a guest and stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? I just needed to be self-driven right now because I worked crazy hours. I was working manufacturing. I worked 6 to 3. So I'm done earlier than everybody else, but that also means I'm sleeping at 8 because I got to be up and in the office by 6. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this. I need to change again. And so I was talking to a girl she's done her full-time, like her 9 to 5 in social media. And I was like, what do you think of my account? Like, I just need like an honest take. Should I continue? It takes a lot of time and money. I don't know if I should keep going with it. And she was just like, Adya, I think that you should keep going with it, but not with the content you're putting out right now because it doesn't feel authentic. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And she's just like, I don't know. It just feels like you're like telling everybody to take care of themselves. But like, I feel like there's more that you can say and there's more that you want to say, but you're holding yourself back. Pretend you're anonymous. Like, don't worry about what people are going to think. What would you talk about to the world? And I was like, honestly, the trauma of having offers rescinded, finding a job during the pandemic, how to optimize your resume, those are all things that I kind of had to struggle through myself. I never had anybody to teach me those things. So maybe that. And she's just like, why not that? And I was like, well, nobody's doing it. And she's like, but isn't that all the more reason to do it? Think of it the other way. The fact that nobody's doing it means that you could be the first one to do it. And I was like, mindset shift. I had not considered that. And she's like, I think you totally could kill it at being the desi career woman. And I was like, check the handle. And like we checked it, it was available. It was an overnight switch. I hadn't even thought about what that would really mean. Since then, once I became the Desi Career Woman, which was in about September of 2020. So I started talking about my experiences with the recent job offers, how to optimize your resume, those kind of things. Reels came up. I was like, okay, good. I'm back to video editing again. I don't necessarily need to open a YouTube because I'd always thought that I would start with Instagram and expand to YouTube. All of this kind of started. And one of the things that people kept coming up to me with was help. They were like, can you help us? And I was like, I'm not qualified to help anybody, I don't think. And they were like, you could become a career coach. So I did my research and I was like, do I need to be like certified in any way or anything like that? And like anybody can become a career coach as long as you call yourself that. So in 2021, roughly, I started career coaching and I had all of these plans of starting like a group course, very big plans, but I started off one-on-one. Again, it came back to that same thing where I realized that coordinating with people was really difficult. And I really liked that we had like a pre-screen call, but how annoying would it be if you guys like set up this whole thing, you had all the questionnaire and like people would just not show up. It started to happen to me more than anything else. And I was like, I am working 9 to 5. I am spending my time after my 9 to 5 to help you who came to me. I did not go out and recruit you. You came to me wanting help. And now you want to help yourself. And so it was kind of one of those things that burnt out within a year. And I was like, you know what? I'm dropping that from my repertoire. I'm just going to focus on like creating content about me and my life. And it kind of keeps coming back in that full circle. I keep trying to involve other people and then I keep coming back to me. So that's kind of the things that it has gone through. Recently, obviously last year, I had time on my hands, but when things are not okay in here, it shows on my account. And like last year, I got laid off twice in a row, kind of. I got laid off in June after working for a startup for 6 months. And then I got hired by another startup in September and got laid off by November. And it really affects your self-confidence and the story that you're telling yourself. And when you look in the mirror, like, who do you see? And like, I kept seeing a failure, somebody who's of no value to a company. I can't value myself if I'm of no value to a company. And that's the narrative I had to like, again, take a mindset shift. And I was like, companies treat employees as being replaceable. That's on the company. That's not on me. I am valuable irrespective of who I'm working for. It's really funny. I used to always introduce myself as, hi, I'm so and so, and I work at blah, blah, blah. That is something that I no longer do because I don't need my self identity to be tied to the company that I'm with today, because that company could literally let me go tomorrow and they wouldn't care twice. The company's not going around introducing themselves as like, hi, my name is Shell and Adya works for me. So why should I do the same? Why should I give them that stature? Yes, I'm Adya and I'm an engineer because I worked for that degree and that degree worked for me. But when it comes to your company, it's not an equal 1:1 relationship where they will never value us as much as we value them. The loyalty is one way, really. It's really strange that like all of these different things like change your experiences. I used to have my company in my bio. Like I was that person that had tagged the company in my bio. I would talk about work all the time. We had a uniform at work in manufacturing. I would wear our logo. And like you will no longer see me do that. But it's really weird that like dissociating your identity from your company entirely is something that took me effort. And again, like you said earlier, it's not like somebody physically told us these things, that you are your company and your company is you, and you are your job and your job is you. But it just somehow happened. Companies' loyalty to their employees is going down too. So I think we should also change our mindset about how we are representing ourselves in society.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really healthy, especially because I think we've been taught that the school you go to is your identity. There's all these little things you feel like you need to like tag yourself with or else you're not worthy. And it's like none of those institutions or like businesses care about you. Like you have to look out for yourself. But yeah, I think that's like such an amazing journey. And I think the through line of you being like, no, I really do enjoy creating content and want to be on social media and like want to have this presence and impact, it comes through in like the authenticity of your content. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I have to have this like specific niche before I start something or else I can't start. And a lot of times it's you figuring it out. You should just start. I mean, I think that's the same with us and the podcast. It's like we started it with one vision of what we wanted to do, and like it's evolving as we have more experiences, more time to think about it,
and meet more people.
Meet more people as we grow. But I think just coming back to why you want to do it and like your actual interest and passion for it is the most important thing. And as long as you don't lose sight of that, you can evolve 100 times, and like the people who want to relate to that or like be there for that will come around, you know,
or they'll stay. And I wanted to touch on something that Priya also had mentioned, but your ability to just like take the leap. Have you always been like that, or is that something that like you've seen work for you time and time again, and so you're like more free to do that? A lot of the times it's really difficult for people to just take the leap. If I'm going to make a change, I'm just going to do it. And that's like the same in our careers as well. Like, do I really like the job I'm in? Like, should I just completely switch industries? Things like that. You know, these are heavy decisions. Something like, you know, having a platform with 33,000 followers, deleting the account, for some, that would be like so scary to do and be like, oh my God, do I want to give this up? But for you, it's like, no, it's not serving me. And then next, I'm so curious, how have you trained yourself to like get to that point? And do you have any tips on mindset for how to be like that?
I would like to say I'm relatively reckless. I do things very randomly. And even when it comes to saying things to people, like I am very open about my opinion, even if it's a negative opinion, and it does rub people the wrong way. I've always had this like no regrets mindset. I'm like, each thing that has happened to me has taught me something new. That really helps me keep that mindset in check. I'm a highly anxious person, but something that really helps me like not get into a spiral is, what is this thing supposed to teach me? For example, like even when it comes to like personal life, like a breakup, I'm like, what did this breakup teach me? Or what did this person come into my life for? Everybody comes into your life for a reason. Find out what that reason is. If you have already learned that, let them go. For example, like even the company that I got laid off from, the first one, I was really upset about it. And I was like, no, but like I learned a lot in that 6 months, and I think I can use these skills to get a new job. So I think I'm good. It also comes back to the thing, I'm a very like tit for tat person. I'm like, if they didn't want me, that's their loss. So that kind of mindset shift, it takes time for me. It's something I don't show at all. People would have no idea that I'm a highly anxious person, or that like sometimes I will literally have like massive breakdowns filming in public. It's really funny. I'm super confident.
Never guess that.
Nobody would. Like, I literally think it's so funny. People wouldn't see that side of me at all unless they really knew me personally.
So I'm really curious. You are such an open book, not just on this conversation with us, but also like on your platform. Have you always been like that? And like, what was your journey to become that transparent? How do you like still stay true to the content that you put out, regardless of what people have to say?
one thing that really helped me was there's like a solid 20 to 30 people that I've never met in real life that follow my content very religiously and have for years.
Mhm.
And it's really weird, but anytime I post something very vulnerable, they will slide into my DMs within seconds. And I know that they have my post notifications on. And it's something that feels like I do have that support. I don't care about the 13,000, even if it speaks to 20 people. That's all I need. As long as somebody relates to it, even if 30 people hate it and 20 people like it, as long as 20 people like it. That 20 number for some reason is something that really sticks with me. That's the thing that I tell myself. I'm like, you are at that point where you can literally post what your true vulnerabilities are and people would still come through for you. For me, initially, Instagram always felt very curated, your highlight reel, your best life. And there weren't enough people talking about the negatives. So I was always very prone to being an open book, but only about the positives. And that's something that's changed a lot over time, especially with the layoffs last year. And I was like, no, this is real. I think people need to know about this. People need to know about what like a career depression could feel like and stuff like that. The lack of creativity, like it affects everything, right? So that's something that I keep telling myself. I'm like, as long as 20 people relate to it, I will do it. That's something that has changed over time, is being an open book about the positives and the negatives. One of the things that my profile kind of like goes back and forth about is body positivity. It's something that I've kind of like struggled with body image issues my whole life. I've started to like talk more about that and like how like sometimes things can be perfect. Like what I consider one of my biggest days in my life was finishing my degree. As you guys heard, like it was a long journey. The day I finished my degree was COVID. There was no graduation. I was really upset about it because it was a long time coming. But my dad made a little like Zoom call with all his relatives. And he was like, we're all going to be here for you. You deserve this. He's an angel. But again, it's weird how sometimes the best intentions, you have no idea how they're really going to turn out. On this Zoom call, this is my grandpa's youngest brother. And my dad was like, oh, like everybody on the call, like give Adya some words of advice, like about corporate world, about being an adult now, something funny or like something real. Just give her a piece of advice. And so this grandpa of mine, he came on the call and he was like, you need to learn how to lose weight from your mom. And my mom is like roughly your size. Like Diksha, I was talking to you. My mom has a very similar body type to you. And so I like looked at her and I looked at my dad and I was just like, what do I say to that? Like, this is my graduation and we're talking about my full-time job and I'm an engineer. All of these great accomplishments, but all people saw was that I had gained weight. And I was just like, shit, that's really annoying. This is like the best day of my life. Just got like shot down in an instant. Like it was deeply, deeply hurtful to me. The incredible thing that happened after was after we got off that Zoom call, each and every relative called and apologized separately.
Aww.
That's the stuff that like sometimes you're just like, for one hater, you have 20 supporters. And so it's those kind of moments where you're like, you know what, I should be open and vulnerable about the negatives as well. And the day I shared that story, there were like 40 people who messaged me that had had similar experiences. And I was like, that's awful. I didn't know this was a shared experience. And that was my first time sharing a post about body positivity. People relate to it so much. And our community is so horrible at doing these kind of things. There's so many things that are going on in people's lives. Don't just go based on like external appearances. Again, I think people have decent intentions, maybe, and they're like worried about you or whatever, but everybody has their own journey. We got to like let them do them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that level of vulnerability and just being open with that conversation, especially in our community that is so heavily judgmental on appearances.
Appearances, yeah, all of it. So many things.
Yeah, and like that subliminally affects all of us, specifically women on like a abnormal scale is so important. I think that really comes through, and like that's what makes your content have so many people gravitate towards it, because it comes back to that shared experience and like just being like, yes, I have actually felt something that exactly
So
like
relatable.
this.
Yeah.
Whether it's the exact same story or something really similar, like I think a lot of people can resonate to that feeling, and being brave enough to post about it is huge and
Yeah.
like makes people feel less alone.
There's so many things that our community does very well. I don't think that we need to compliment those things because I think we're already doing good at that. I think the things that we could do better at is what we need to talk about more. So the reason I talk about the negatives is so that we can be different. We can be the change, but not everybody thinks that way. And like, that's definitely something that I had never thought about, because I think when we sit around in a group of girls or whatever, like, I feel like I always talk about these negative experiences and people will also share theirs. That's my thing. I'm speaking my truth. And that's what I keeps coming back to. My truth is something that I want to speak out into the world.
I honestly think that sometimes the most prideful people about their communities are the ones brave enough to critique them. because you truly want
The best.
the best. We want to improve and evolve and like grow. Yeah, I think you can be prideful about being desi and then still like it's not black and white.
And no community is perfect.
Yeah, nobody's perfect. Like
World is
nobody's perfect, and we've seen that time and time again. I think it just makes it more like honest. Yeah.
Amazing. I want to go a little bit more into how you organize yourself and how you're able to pursue being this voice on social media and also being consistent in your day-to-day life, your actual 9 to 5. And I'm curious, how do you find the balance in every single thing that you do and in being active on all your platforms?
I believe in outsourcing. I outsource what I don't enjoy. Is what I like to, the way I like to phrase it, the things that I'm not very good at, or the things that somebody else could do better than. I love video editing and I edit all my reels myself. I film all my reels myself, but I will occasionally hire a photographer for an hour and do like a content dump day and just create still photos, 4 or 5 different outfits, and have content for the next like couple months. For example, a big part of like influencer world is brand partnerships. So for the last almost year, I have not pitched a single brand myself. I have completely outsourced that. I had an agent earlier, and then since then I've had virtual assistants doing that stuff for me. So that's stuff that I don't have time for it, and I definitely don't enjoy doing it, and I don't think I'm very good at it either. So I'm like, somebody else can do this better than me. I'm glad to outsource it. Same with like graphic design, Canva work. I am not a Canva person at all. Like I will outsource those things as much as possible. So I think that's something that's definitely helpful. The other thing that I think is really helpful is optimizing your time in whatever way you can. So like for me right now, what really works for me, I'm living at home with my parents. A lot of things are getting taken care of for me. Like my mom is making food, and like generally speaking, groceries will show up to the house. I'm not really sure who's getting them. But like it's just things I don't have to think about anymore. And life has become a lot easier to balance here. But when I was in Seattle, I would Instacart. I wouldn't bother going to the grocery store. I'm like, nope, it's too much work. The city traffic is insane. I would wake up at like 7 a.m. on a Saturday, and I would place the order first thing in the morning, and I would show up before lunchtime. And those kind of things, like I would outsource wherever necessary to conserve time. And from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m., I would have been creating content and somebody else was doing my shopping for me. And that's something that I just like, I created that in my head. I was like, the payoff, the ROI is there. So for me to let somebody else do that gives me more time to create content. I'm a big fan of outsourcing in general. One of the things now that I've moved back home, previously, when you live alone, you have nothing better to do. I could create content at any point in time. Now I try to be a little bit mindful. I'm not like creating transition videos with like heels being thrown around the house at like midnight. I would like my parents to not be like alarmed when they're sleeping. And I also try to prioritize like spending time with them, because I know that this is like a very lucky period for me that I get to live at home, because I never thought that this would happen. I never planned on living in Houston. And so I'm like, I will prioritize spending time with them. And so I will literally block out time, and I'm just like, okay, Saturday morning, these are the things that I'm going to do. And then I'm done at lunch. And then I'll take a nap with my mom and we'll watch a TV show together. And then we'll like spend the afternoon and evening together. And then I'll go out with my friends in the evening. Blocking your calendar and like drawing your own boundaries is like very, very, very key. And I think being organized about what you need to do. I'm getting a little overwhelmed. I was traveling in August for like one weekend, and it just threw off my entire schedule because I hadn't done a weekend trip in forever. When I came back from that, I don't know why, I've just been like really overwhelmed. So like being in touch with yourself and like checking in with yourself is really important to be like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Do you need some rest? Do you need to cancel something? So like I canceled 2 partnerships that I had, even though they were paid. And I was like, you know what? I just don't have the time to do this right now. And I don't have like the creativity to go create good content for this brand. So I'd rather not do it. And that's something that like you have to think about, like, am I doing justice by my work? Or am I just going to do like a really slipshod job and call it a day?
Completely. That's a really unique mindset, especially with the immigrant mentality and like being young. You're like, oh, if I want to start these side hustles, I have to do everything myself.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I need to like be working 24 hours a day because I have to do it all myself. I can't invest in myself. I think we're not taught to like invest monetarily.
Absolutely.
At all.
Never been taught that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels really uncomfortable. But like you said, a lot of times the payoff, like, what am I getting from this investment? And if that's more sleep or like, you know, more time to be creative, more time to do better work, then like probably it's worth it. So I think that was really refreshing to hear that perspective, because I haven't really heard it from like other young people doing like side hustles that often.
Yeah. I joke about this all the time, but like my Instagram is not like profitable. Last year, like I did a salary transparency transparency reel, I made $3,000 last year. So $3,000 for something that takes more than 10 hours a week over 12 months, it is in no way profitable. And this year, in fact, I'm running a loss because I've outsourced more things, but I'm okay with it because I think the impact is high enough that I'm like, you know what? I'm good with it. It brings me happiness. Even if it means I have to get my nails done less, that's okay.
I love that. And then you
Yeah.
also mentioned that you live with your parents. So how has your family reacted to your growth on Instagram and your transparency with it all? And how have they been supportive or provided their 2 cents to what you do?
It's really funny. And I say this all the time. The brown community is obsessed with accomplishments. So Instagram was like a big no-no in my family, especially like they were against Facebook. And so they were definitely against Instagram. So I didn't even tell my parents for at least a year. And then continually, the amount of support I've gotten after I hit 10K, that 10K number was like the magic number. They're like, oh my God, there's 10,000 people in this world who follow my daughter. She must be saying something good on here, or like she must be successful at it. But the funny thing is you never reach 10K if you don't start at 0.
Yeah.
It's like supporting people from like the real ground up is so important. And I think that this was very conditional support. They were like, oh, okay, now you're at 10K. Now we're proud. And I'm just like, okay, I won't say anything. It's fine. It's definitely something that has changed over time. I think their perspective has changed over time. The image of influencers was always very flighty. That's the image that people had of influencers, and especially my parents having not been on social media. And since then, my dad actually, I think as of like 2 months ago, is on Instagram. And he was like, I am going to download your Instagram and I want to see your content. And I was like, okay, like up to you. Like it's a public account. Like I can't stop you, literally. Like he now spends a lot of time seeing different forms of content, not just your stereotypical TikTok dancer, high schooler, cheerleader mentality. Like that is not what all of social media is. And the more content you find, Instagram will show you more similar content. So like the fact that he follows me, he's seeing other influencers who are talking about similar things and stuff like that. And he's actually relatively surprised about how impactful Instagram is that he had never experienced before. Yeah.
And oh my God, nothing I relate to more than parents being proud after you prove them that something is worth your time and energy.
They don't know what it is. Give them the benefit of the doubt. They're just like, we don't know what this is until it has like a real accolade behind it. And they're like, oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, like they don't get it until like they see the results, you know?
Yeah.
But it's amazing that, you know, they have come around and now they understand why you do what you do.
And it's really funny. Like my mom now, she's fascinated by the content creation side of it more than the posting. Yeah. So she now takes my tripod and goes and takes her own photos. And then she'll come and show me. She's like, look, I took this photo by myself. And then she loves being in my reels now, especially when it's transition reels, because she's like, it's magic. Like after you edit it, it's just magic. We did that. And so she like loves being in my reels now. And it's really funny how like it's come full circle, because she was actually the one who was like, I don't want to put things out there, which is still true. She definitely doesn't post on her own account at all, but she doesn't mind being a face on my account, which is definitely not something that I ever asked her to do. She herself was like, can I be in your reel? And I was like, yeah, you want to be in my reel? Of course.
That's amazing. So sweet. I'm obsessed with that.
There's still a line. Like we had a family day the other day at work. Most of the people I work with are married with kids. So everybody came with their spouse and kids. And my mom was like, wait, but if it was family night, why didn't you bring your parents? And I was like, Mom, I can't take my parents to work.
All right. Well, that was like all of our questions. So thank you so much. I feel like this was such a great, natural, flowing conversation, and we learned so much. I know there's so many insights that I've gotten from this that I'm like still thinking about and sitting with. Really appreciate you coming on the pod and like being so vulnerable and honest with us.
But wait, we do have to ask you a favorite tradition because we need to keep it light and fun and fresh. So can you tell us, since you were previously and currently also a skincare guru, please tell us your must-have skincare items.
Must-have skincare items. So I personally have very, very dry skin. So my absolute must-have, I really like a hyaluronic serum. My favorite one is from Aveda, and I would die without it. I could use that instead of moisturizer because it has that moisturizing quality in the serum itself. So that is like the number one thing that I would die without. The other, like, I would say like frivolous skincare product that I absolutely cannot live without is a physical exfoliant. Any like scrubby thing. My two favorite are the cup of coffee from Lush and the Agrani Haldi exfoliant. Those are the two that I would absolutely die without. And like my skin genuinely feels so much better after I use them.
Iconic. Well, thank you so much, Adya. I have learned so much. I'm so hyped because now I feel inspired. Okay, also, can you please plug yourself and anywhere our audience can find you. I'm sure they would love to support you in any way.
Yeah. So my Instagram handle is the Desi Career Woman, DESI Career Woman. I'm really horrible about keeping up with multiple platforms. I really only post on my Instagram. I do have a TikTok if you want to go back and scroll through old videos, but I have not posted in months. And if there are any brands out there that you want to reach out or anything like that, my email address is thedesicareerwoman@gmail.com. But if you're like an individual and you just want to like slide into the DMs, feel free to do that. I check all of my DMs and I will respond to you as long as you're respectful.
Thank you so much. And we'll include all of that information in the description.
Bye.
Bye.